This case was hidden because it threatened to expose a silent network operating behind the veneer of American healthcare. But today I will tell you how a poisoned dinner unraveled a web of secrets that had been buried for decades. For years, no one dared to speak of it. But one forgotten detail in the archive changed everything. It started in Akron, Ohio back in 2011. A routine investigation into a series of sudden deaths at a local assisted living facility, Meadowbrook Manor, turned dark very quickly. The initial report suggested natural causes: heart failure, strokes, some mysterious infections. But I knew better. I had seen enough to recognize when something was off. The victims were mostly elderly, but their blood work told a different story. Heavy metals, traces of neurotoxins, something deliberately introduced. Someone had poisoned them. The first key figure I tracked was Dr. Michael Carter, a respected local physician with a clean record, or so it seemed. His name kept popping up in the records, prescriptions, and, oddly enough, in the transactions of a shell company registered in Delaware. I had to dig deeper. FOIA requests revealed nothing obvious, just a series of coded transactions, untraceable to any public account. Shadow money, moving in and out of the system. Then I uncovered a pattern. The victims had all been prescribed a particular medication, but the pharmacy records showed no record of the drugs ever being dispensed. It was a ghost operation. Fake prescriptions, ghost patients. Someone was funneling poison through seemingly legitimate channels. But why? And who was behind it? This was the start of Operation Red Moon, an internal code I never officially acknowledged. Would you have noticed this detail in the file? The pharmacy logs that didn't match the prescriptions? Or the strange, unregistered minors listed in some of the case files? I questioned every lead, but doubts began to creep in. Was I chasing shadows? Could Carter himself be innocent? Or was he just a pawn in a larger game? As I followed the trail, I discovered that Carter had ties to a shadow clinic in Fresno, run by a man named Marcus Hall. Hall was a known figure, linked to illicit clinics across the Southwest, operating under the radar. They specialized in discreet solutions, euphemisms for unregulated procedures. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This was a network of clandestine doctors, rogue pharmacies, and unregistered labs, all connected by a web of corruption. Then came the betrayal. A whistleblower, a nurse who worked at Meadowbrook, contacted me anonymously. She had witnessed Carter meeting with Hall on multiple occasions, exchanging small packages. She claimed the poison was being tested in controlled doses, then administered to vulnerable victims. This wasn't accidental. This was murder on a scale that bordered on industrial. I remember the moment I found the encrypted communications, email chains with code names, hidden in the depths of a dark web server. The phrase, Operation Red Moon, appeared again, confirming my worst fears. Someone was orchestrating this. Someone high up with access to the system, with the power to hide the truth. Why? That's the question that haunted me. The money, millions from untraceable sources, cryptocurrency transfers that vanished into thin air. The families of the victims, many of whom never received justice, were kept in the dark. Official reports swept it under the rug, labeling deaths as unknown causes. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, a shadow operation thrived. I began to suspect that the entire operation was protected by internal rules, silence, rituals of denial. If you spoke out, you vanished from the records, you disappeared from public view. It was a culture of complicity, built on fear and money. The families, the staff, even some officials. Everyone knew, but no one dared to blow the whistle. Then I hit a wall. My investigation was unofficial from the start. No warrants, no subpoenas, just me, chasing ghosts with limited resources. I tried to bring it to the DA's office in Travis County, but pressure came from above. Unofficial pressure. I was warned to back off, to forget what I'd seen, but I couldn't. Not when I had uncovered something so monstrous. And so, I kept digging, but the cracks appeared. Carter vanished from the records, quietly exiled or silenced. Marcus Hall disappeared after a raid, last seen leaving a motel in Texas. The shadow network went dark. Yet, I can't help but wonder, did the truth die with them? Or is it still out there, lurking behind the facade of legitimate medicine? Would you have believed the official story, that these deaths were just tragic coincidences? Or does the evidence suggest a carefully concealed conspiracy? What looks most suspicious to you in this story? The ghost prescriptions, the encrypted emails, the unregistered minors? There are layers here, deeper than most will ever see. And why do you think this was hidden for so long? Because exposing it would threaten powerful interests, those who profit from secrecy, from silence. The system protects itself, even if it costs innocent lives. If this case were investigated today, how do you think it would end? Would justice finally be served, or would the machine continue to operate in the shadows? This file was never meant to be released. These files rarely survive to the end, but I've seen enough to know that the truth is darker than most imagine. I solved more than one case, and this is only the beginning. Subscribe if you're ready for the next. Every day I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. It really helps this channel. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. The trail grew colder after Carter and Hall vanished, but I wasn't ready to give up. My instincts told me the operation was still alive, hidden behind a veneer of legitimate businesses. I revisited the FOIA files, cross-referenced license plates, and traced financial transactions that I had initially overlooked. In the back of my mind, I wondered, how deep did this go? Who else was involved? One night I found a lead that chilled me. A zip code, 73301, an obscure part of Texas with a cluster of nondescript warehouses and strip malls. Nothing seemed out of place on the surface, but a deeper look revealed a pattern. Shipments linked to unmarked medical supply containers moving through freight companies with no clear destination. I recall pulling the records late into the night, my eyes tired but my mind alert. Would you have caught this detail? The untraceable freight that seemed too innocuous but was actually the backbone of the operation? It was the kind of thing most investigators miss, yet it was staring right at me. I questioned whether I was seeing patterns where there were none, but the evidence kept piling up. Behind the scenes, I discovered that some of these warehouses were connected to shell companies registered under false identities, aliases like Bright Path Logistics and Sunrise Medical Supplies. They had no physical storefronts, no employees, just digital footprints designed to mislead. I remember the frustration of trying to track these phantom entities, knowing that somewhere, someone was watching me. In the middle of this chaos, I received an anonymous tip, an encrypted message claiming that the real mastermind was an influential figure in the healthcare industry, someone with ties to state officials and lobbyists. The message hinted at a shadow council, controlling the flow of drugs, money, and silence. I wondered, was this just paranoia, or was I onto something? The more I investigated, the more I realized the scope was vast. The poison wasn't just a localized problem, it was a nationwide operation. Ghost clinics in California, unregistered labs in Florida, and even reports of similar cases cropping up in the Midwest. The pattern was consistent. Vulnerable populations targeted, a web of deceit spun tightly around the system, and everyone involved bound by unspoken rules. What if this was happening in your city? Imagine the quiet devastation, the families left with questions, the authorities turning a blind eye. Would you have suspected that behind the clean facades of clinics and pharmacies, something so sinister was operating? And then I uncovered something even more disturbing. A series of internal memos, accessed through a compromised email account, revealed that some of these deaths had been deliberately covered up. Official reports were altered, autopsy results manipulated, and the real cause of death concealed under layers of bureaucratic language. I remember reading those memos and feeling the weight of betrayal. Who had authorized this? How many lives had been lost before someone decided to cover it up? This is where the line between investigation and paranoia blurred. I questioned myself. Did I have enough evidence? Was I risking everything on whispers and shadowy connections? But then I found a crucial piece, a handwritten note, tucked away in a sealed file with the words, Operation Red Moon, Phase 2, and a list of names, dates, and coded references. Someone had kept a record, perhaps out of guilt or a desire for justice. I can't forget the moment I realized that some of the key figures involved had deep ties to government officials. Payments traced back to lobbying firms, untraceable transfers to offshore accounts. It was clear they had built a fortress of secrecy. The very institutions meant to protect the public were protecting the secret. Would you believe this if you saw it with your own eyes? The idea that a network of doctors, financiers, and corrupt officials could manipulate lives without accountability? I kept asking myself, how many more victims are out there, still suffering in silence? And then, the inevitable happened. I was warned, by an official I once trusted, to step back. The pressure intensified. Files went missing. My contacts started to fade. I was told I was overreaching, that I was dangerous. but I knew too much. I had already crossed the point of no return. In the end, my investigation was compromised. Carter's shell company was quietly dissolved, Hall's operations shut down with no formal charges. The shadow network went dark, and the victims' families remained in the dark, their pain unacknowledged. I can't help but wonder, did anyone truly seek justice? Or was this just another case buried in a system that prefers secrets? Now, I sit here, pondering. Why do stories like this stay hidden? Because revealing them threatens the very foundations of those in power. The truth is inconvenient. The truth is dangerous. And sometimes, the truth disappears, along with the people who dared to uncover it. What do you see in this story? A conspiracy too vast to unravel, or just the grim reality of a system that turns a blind eye? If you've listened this far, you're searching for the truth. Subscribe. I'll show you the next case. Every day I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. These files rarely survive to the end. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. The silence didn't last long. After the internal memos and encrypted contacts, I began receiving subtle threats, anonymous calls, strange messages that disappeared before I could trace them. It was clear someone was watching, someone who wanted this story buried forever. I remember sitting alone in my office, poring over the latest batch of documents, knowing I was risking more than just my career. I was risking my life. One evening, I uncovered a hidden link, an encrypted server nestled deep within the dark web, supposedly controlled by a shadowy figure known only as the Architect. The files there were even more disturbing, detailed logs of poison batches, delivery routes, and coded personnel lists. It was as if the entire operation had been mapped out in clandestine detail. Would you have believed this if you saw it? A secret blueprint of death, designed and executed by a covert network operating within the very fabric of the healthcare industry. The more I dug, the clearer it became. This was no rogue operation. It was a calculated, systemic effort, one that relied on silence, complicity, and fear. As I traced the communications, I found evidence that some of the disappeared individuals, doctors who threatened to expose the truth, whistleblowers, even local officials, had been silenced. Their records erased or altered to fit the official narrative. I questioned whether the files I had uncovered were the entire story or just the tip of the iceberg. And then I realized there was a pattern in the victims' backgrounds. Many had ties to vulnerable communities, elderly, disabled, or those without strong family support. They were chosen carefully, as if part of a larger, sinister calculus. An unspoken rule: target those who wouldn't be missed, then cover it up quickly before it drew attention. It made me wonder, if this had happened in your family, in your town, what would you have done? Would you have accepted the official explanation, or would you have demanded answers, even if it meant risking everything? There was one last haunting discovery. Hidden in a series of unmarked files was a photograph, an image of a dinner party dated June 14, 2011. The caption read, "Operation Red Moon, Initial Test Phase." Sitting around the table were several faces, some familiar: doctors, pharmacists, a few local officials. Their smiles looked innocent, but I knew better. They had been part of a ritual, a clandestine meeting to confirm the plan's execution. Why was this photo kept? Was it a reminder of their collective guilt? Or a warning to others who might try to blow the lid off? I still wonder, did they think they were untouchable? Did they believe the system would protect them no matter what? The more I uncovered, the more I saw a pattern of betrayal. Families betrayed, trust shattered, lives destroyed, all for profit and control. The system that was supposed to safeguard the vulnerable had become a weapon, and the people behind it, they operated in the shadows, insulated by layers of secrecy and silence. Eventually, I reached a point where I knew I had to step back. My investigation was no longer just about uncovering facts. It was about survival. I had crossed a line. The threats grew more explicit. Files I had collected were suddenly inaccessible. I was told to keep quiet, to forget what I knew, but I couldn't. Not now, not after all I'd seen. And so, I left the official domain, but I kept the evidence. I still have the files, hidden, secure, waiting, because I know they won't stay buried forever. Someone with enough power will try again. Someone who believes secrets are worth more than lives. Why do you think this story stayed hidden? because revealing it could topple entire institutions, because the truth is too dangerous, and because some people prefer darkness over accountability. If this were investigated today, how many more victims would be uncovered? How many more hidden connections would surface? Would justice finally be served? Or would the truth continue to be suppressed, buried in a system that values reputation over lives? This file was never meant to be released. These files rarely survive to the end, but I've seen enough to know that the darkness behind this case is only deeper. I solved more than one case, and this is only the beginning. Subscribe if you're ready for the next. Every day, I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. These files rarely survive to the end. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. The threats intensified, and I knew I was getting close to something that someone desperately wanted hidden. I began to notice a pattern. Certain locations linked through a chain of shell companies, unmarked delivery trucks passing through obscure interstate routes, like I was tracing the veins of a clandestine operation. I remember late nights poring over GPS logs, cross-referencing delivery times, trying to connect dots that most would dismiss as coincidence. But I knew better. This was the lifeline of Operation Red Moon. One particular lead pointed me toward a nondescript warehouse near I-10 in Fresno. No signage, no obvious activity from the outside, just a concrete shell with a single loading dock. I was tempted to investigate further, but I hesitated. I wondered, would I be walking into a trap? Or was this the missing piece I'd been searching for? My instincts told me I was close, dangerously close to the heart of the operation. Would you have dared to enter? Or would you have waited for backup that would never arrive? I chose to approach cautiously. I sent in an anonymous tip to local authorities, hoping to catch someone off guard. The next day, federal agents raided the place. Inside, they found a labyrinth of hidden corridors, contaminated equipment, and containers labeled with obscure codes. It was a makeshift lab, producing small batches of toxic substances under the guise of legitimate pharmaceuticals. But what truly disturbed me was the evidence of recent activity. Fresh chemicals, unregistered personnel, and a digital ledger with timestamps matching the victims' deaths. Someone had been operating this place well after the initial investigation. They had learned from their mistakes, adapted, and kept going. Here's the question. If I hadn't sent that tip, would they have continued? Would this operation have gone unnoticed until it was too late again? I keep asking myself, how many other locations like this are still out there, hidden in plain sight? And then I uncovered a chilling detail. A ledger entry in handwriting I recognized. Someone's personal notes referencing Phase 2, scheduled for the upcoming quarter. It was as if they believed they were invincible, that their work was a secret only they could control. I wondered, was this just a test or part of a larger ongoing plan? It was then I realized that the network was more than just doctors and shady labs. It involved a complex financial web, cryptocurrency transfers, offshore accounts, and untraceable investments. I traced a few transfers to a shell company registered in Panama. The money flowed through multiple layers, each designed to obscure its origin. It was clear this was an international operation with ties reaching beyond the US borders. Would you believe the scale of this now? How deeply embedded this network was, woven into the very fabric of legitimate industries. It was a systemic cancer, feeding on the vulnerable, protected by layers of silence and fear. Every attempt I made to connect with law enforcement was met with stonewalling. I could feel the walls closing in around me. Then came the revelation of a final, devastating piece. A whistleblower, an ex-employee of one of the shell companies, came forward with a confession. He described how they had engineered the entire operation to maximize profits, using unregulated chemicals, cutting corners on safety, and targeting specific communities where oversight was lax. His voice trembled as he described seeing patients die from what he called hidden experiments. Would you have believed this if you heard it directly? That this was not just a criminal enterprise, but a calculated, cold-blooded scheme to harvest lives for profit? The question haunted me. How many victims had this network claimed before I even started looking? Finally, I reached the point of no return. I had enough evidence to blow the lid wide open if I could get it past the walls of bureaucratic silence. But I knew, deep down, that exposing the truth would come at a cost. The forces behind Operation Red Moon had connections that ran far and deep, into corridors I couldn't even see. I wonder, if someone else had been in my place, would they have been as brave? Or would they have turned away, silenced by fear? What if your loved ones were among the victims? Would you have accepted the official lie or demanded the truth? And now, I sit here, knowing the operation is still out there, hidden, waiting. The files I kept are my only safeguard, my last whisper of the truth. I know they won't stay hidden forever. Someone will try again. Someone will keep the cycle going, in the shadows, beyond the reach of justice. Why was this story kept secret? Because the truth threatens to topple powerful interests, those who profit from death, from silence, from complicity. It's easier for them to bury the evidence than to face accountability. But I ask you, what if this was your family? How many more lives have been lost in the silence? If this case were uncovered today, how many more layers of deception would be exposed? How many more officials, doctors, and financiers would be implicated? Would justice finally prevail? Or would the entire network re-emerge stronger, more hidden than before? This file was never meant to be released. These files rarely survive to the end. But I've seen enough to know that the darkness behind Operation Red Moon is only deeper than most imagine. I solved more than one case, and this is only the beginning. Subscribe if you're ready for the next revelation. Every day I'll post a real case from my archive, investigations I solved that still unsettle me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment. These files rarely survive to the end. Stay safe. See you tomorrow.